this is Izzy, and I'm getting at you. Now, older guys, younger chicks, you grown men, y'all need to split.
The Get At You campaign.
I think that's really important for people to see a spectrum of what humanity looks like, as well as what the African diaspora looks like.
And the Fist and Heel Performance Group coming up on Black Nouveau.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Black Nouveau. I'm Milton, Dockery.
And I'm Faithe. We're glad you could join us. On this edition, we'll examine the disparities in foster care for Milwaukee's African Americans.
And we'll talk with choreographer Reggie Wilson, a native Milwaukeean whose dance troupe has an international reputation.
But first, the Get At You campaign. It's a part of a grassroots strategy designed to encourage men of all ages to share their wisdom and words about social concerns.
You know, it just occurred to me, you're old enough to have sex, which means you're old enough to have a family. And if you're old enough to have a family, you're old enough to have responsibilities. But it seems to me also, if you're old enough to do all of those things, you should be old enough to ask questions of your partner. And it's old enough to ask to use a condom if you need to use a condom. You should be old enough to be responsible to purchase them if you have to purchase them. And if you're really not old enough for asking those questions or being responsible for those things, are you really old enough to be a parent? I'd have to ask that question first before I had sex.
The campaign and contest moved into high gear in October at the Milwaukee Fatherhood Summit, as attendees were invited to share their thoughts about being a good father.
I had when I found out I was going to be a father was that the fear of being I didn't want to be a bad dad. My father wasn't there the entire time, but the time that he was there, I was grateful, so I learned from that. So one of my biggest priorities is being in my son's life at all costs. Whether it's something to do with the school, I'm there. Whether it's something to do with him personal, I'm there. And I let him know every morning that I love him, and if he has any issues, all he has to do is come and talk to me. That's what dads do.
You want to be a man of your word, always. You know, integrity is big. I mean, always, if you say you're going to do something, you do it. If you tell somebody you're going to be there at a certain time, you're there at that time earlier if possible. You want people to be able to depend on your word. Your word is everything. Without your word, you don't have anything because no one wants to talk to you because they're going to view you as a liar. I mean, to be a successful and respected father, I think the same thing applies. Don't be a hypocrite. Don't tell your kids not to do something and you do it. You know, you have to practice what you preach. You have to lead by example.
I think being a father in your kids' lives is very important because I was one of them kids that didn't have a father. And now that I'm a father, I see how very important it is and how much my kids depend on me and how much it is and how much it is important that I be in my kids' life to grow up to be a successful person and a respectful person, and teach them how to be a man. You know what I'm saying? Because don't you want your kids to be a man? You don't want them to be out in the streets doing nothing wrong or cussing the teacher out. You want them to get an education and grow up to be a good man and a good father like myself. And right now, I'm still working on being a good father. So with that, be in your kids' life because they deserve a good man.
Okay, guys, it's really important for a male to be in the children's life for a number of reasons. One, for the girls, you got to teach your girls how to be women. And the girl should know how a man should treat a woman. For boys, they got to see the strength, they got to see the stability, they got to see the support. Ray, who's the best dad in the whole wide world? Really? Why?
Because you take care of me.
Really? Give me a high five. All right.
And we are joined now by Ray Nitti and Young Oki, local rappers who are part of the campaign. Welcome, gentlemen. Ray, what's the purpose of the contest?
Well, the purpose of the contest is really to target the males in the community of Milwaukee and get them to upload 30-second videos to getatyou.org, spreading a positive message to the community, and also put it on Twitter, YouTube, and all the other social networks and stuff like that, Facebook, whatever the case may be.
Okay, let's talk about what motivated you both to get involved in the contest. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, actually, what motivated me was I'm part of an organization called the Running Rebels community organization, and I've been a part of the organization since 2002 and helping do things in the community. You know, I started out doing a lot of positive music, and it kind of evolved and grew into more, I would say, mainstream music. And a close friend of mine, Victor Barnett, told me about the program, and he really asked me to do him a favor. And I think that being in the position I'm in a good position for people to listen to me. And if it's ever time for me to speak, I think that it's now. So,
Ray, is your motivation any different?
It's kind of the same. It's more so I saw the need for positive male role models in the community of Milwaukee, and like Oki said, like I'm in a good position to where people listen to what we say. So it's like, what's a better time to start speaking about something positive than now? Like, our music influenced a lot of people, so let's influence them in a positive way.
How important, Ray, are the issues in the video?
They're extremely important. It's a whole lot of different issues they target, such as older males getting with younger females, how to treat a woman, how to be a real man, and certain issues like that. It's just trying to build positive males in the community of Milwaukee.
What are your thoughts, Oki, on the issues in the video?
I think that the issues are, they're kind of bigger than just fatherhood. It kind of starts at fatherhood, and then, you know, it kind of develops into different kind of problems. You know, if people end up being young adults and then they can't support a family, you know, sometimes they end up dabbling a little bit in the street and, you know, get into the street life to try to support their family. So it's real important issues, and it's real things that go on every day, you know, on a day-to-day basis, and it's relative to everybody.
How can people see the videos, Ray, and vote on them?
To see the videos, you want to go to getatyou.org, and you can also vote on the website as well.
And what does the winner get?
I believe the winner...
They get a free Apple iPad.
iPad.
That's
okay.
the new one.
The new one.
Not an iPod, an iPad.
Right. An iPad. And you know, let's just talk a little bit more about after you win. What happens after you win? I mean, what do you do with your video? What do you hope to do with the video?
Well, I'm not really in it to win the iPad. You know, I got a lot of products and stuff already that I don't really know, gadgets and stuff I don't really know how to use. So it's not about the iPad. I think it's more about creating awareness to me. So I would like to see the videos get more hits, and it become kind of like a household thing, you know, for people to go check out videos, upload their own videos, and kind of start like a constant blog about, you know, real issues. And it can go further than just, you know, fatherhood. It can touch on a lot of different things. Is there something that you hold special to your heart that you are passionate about besides the fatherhood issue? It's a lot of different things. It's mainly, I think a big thing for me would be like street life. I would want to see, you know, some people touch on that a little bit, because that had been a part me growing up, and I know probably for Ray too, or Nitti. You know, so I would like to see that touched on a bit, you know, and I think that that's something that could be in the near future for Get At You. I want to thank both of you gentlemen for joining us. I think what you're doing is absolutely awesome, and it's great to see young men involved in social issues about fatherhood and about what it takes to be a great young man. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Reggie Wilson's Fist and Hill Performance Group is an internationally known dance troupe based in New York. Margot Spann spoke with the native Milwaukeean during his recent visit to Wisconsin.
We will meet, my baby, we will meet. She keeps growing for days. Don't you cry, baby, don't you cry, don't you cry.
In the work that I do, I often try and find ways of reclaiming African and African American history that has kind of had a negative light turned on it, and use that as a place of empowerment or strength.
Milwaukee native Reggie Wilson is the founder and artistic director of Fist and Hill Performance Group. The New York-based ensemble takes dance to the next level, blending African movement with Caribbean, modern, and African American dance. Wilson and his group are in Sheboygan collaborating with community groups and conducting workshops on African dance.
I knew that there weren't a lot of dance presenting organizations in Milwaukee or the Wisconsin area. And being from Milwaukee, wanted to be able to bring my dance back home.
What do you think it is about your particular dance group that makes you unique?
The entire spectrum of the company is the spectrum of the African diaspora. We have African Americans, we have 3 Caribbean folk, 2 Trinidadians, 1 Jamaican. We have another African vocalist in the group. He's from Sierra Leone. He's a physical therapist as well. So it's a mix-up, and to me, I think that's really important for people to see a spectrum of what humanity looks like, as well as what the African diaspora looks like.
How would you say your Milwaukee upbringing has influenced your production group? I mean, you mentioned that you guys are basically from all over and all different backgrounds. What would you say that you bring to the group, especially as a Milwaukeean?
Frozen custard. No. I love frozen custard, and we haven't had an opportunity to get it here. There are weird little things that are peculiar to this region and Milwaukee, and also going to Chicago, and the history of my family, which I think is true for a lot of black folks in this area. Our families came up from the South, from the Delta, and what those cultures were and how they kind of shifted when they got up north.
Wilson says his education at Rufus King High School also prepared him for working with people of different cultures.
All of our parents knew the other parents, and you know, they're Mexican, Korean, white, black, Jewish, rich, poor, you know, east side, west side, north side, northwest side. So that kind of model of we can get along, I think is something also that I got from my particular upbringing in Milwaukee. The main thread of the piece, I think in my head, was when I first encountered stepping. And not the fraternity stepping, but the hand dancing, partnering stepping. And that happened by me going back to Milwaukee. I live in New York. Was visiting family over the holidays and wanted to go out one night, called a cousin of mine up and he said, okay, yeah, I know a club we can go to. We went into the nightclub and there were people there, not just one generation, but older people, younger people. Music felt a little slower than the R&B I was used to and had a kind of a really specific rhythm. And people were actually dancing with their hands, which kind of having spent a lot of time on the East Coast, that was either supposed to be disco dancing or Latin dancing or maybe ballroom dancing. But in the African American context, I didn't have a present day space in my brain for what that was supposed to be, so I kind of freaked out. I was like, and they're all doing it, and it was so smooth, and it was so cool, and it was so connected to a sense of who I am or was as an African American. I'd been traveling a lot in the Caribbean, I'd been traveling a lot in Africa, going to a lot of nightclubs there, and there people do hand dancing kind of stuff, but there's something about the vibe, the energy felt like that. So it was very connected to the African diaspora, but it felt very much produced. It was indigenous. It wasn't something that had been adopted into it. I could feel that it came from us. I don't like to consider myself an authority on anybody or anybody's culture, including my own. So the research that I do, I always see myself as an artist, and that the lens that the images that I'm presenting to the audience is through the lens of my eyes. And I want them to be conscious of that and conscious of the fact that they are also seeing this information through their life experiences. So the research, to me, it comes into the work in a lot of different ways. It might be actually the way that it exists in the culture where it's from, or it might just be one element of that thing, of a particular dance. Humans have been moving for millennia, and how we come together is something that's really fascinating to me. So to me, if to spread that kind of gospel of, you know, take the importance off your shoulders. This is not something new. It can be done. People that are different can get together and coexist. I think that that's a really important kind of message and experience that people can have as well as witness and say, okay, there's a possibility. Just to have that image in your brain somewhere, it's like, okay, it's a possibility.
In a city with such a high poverty rate, it is not a surprise that there are a growing number of children going into the child welfare system. Nitti Collins reports on a recent summit that was held to bring attention to the problem.
I lived in around 28 homes. Yes, I've been moved around quite a lot. I've been in about 15 different schools.
There's a desperate need for awareness around the number of African American children and families of color who make up the local foster care system.
Fresh Start Family Services, along with other institutions, held a summit to raise awareness of the child welfare system. The Child Welfare Summit addressed and focused on racial disparities affecting children in protective services, especially foster care and adoption. Professionals and lay people came together to dialogue and strategize on how to better work through a system where statewide African American children are overrepresented in the foster care system by 40%.
And yet they represent, less than about 15% of the overall child population. And in Milwaukee County, they make up to 71% of the foster care system. So we're talking about a disproportionate overrepresentation of African American children in the child welfare system, in Milwaukee County in particular.
Peter Powers said that states with child welfare systems centered in urban areas such as Milwaukee show racial disparities in the services provided. A major connection is poverty.
Kids growing up in wealthy families do not end up in the foster care system. Even though there might be abuse going on in those households, they have resources they can turn to, right? Families in impoverished neighborhoods, they don't have resources that they can turn to. And so by the time the public child welfare system's involved, the family is already in a crisis situation.
When you look at disparity, issues of disparity, you're looking at how they're being treated within that particular system or population. So, for example, foster care. African American children make up 8% of the state's minor population or minor youth population, but yet our children make up over 54% of the foster care populations.
Dr. Ruth McRoy has worked in the field of social work and adoption for over 30 years. She said the primary disparities are between African American and white children or American Indian and white children.
Minority children are much more likely to be coming into the system, to remain in the system, being less likely to be adopted, and more likely to be aging out of the nation's foster care system.
Stephen Allen Schoberg has felt the disparities of the child welfare system. He aged out of the system, a system he's been a part of all his life. He said the system caused him to mature early, being he's lived an adult life since about the age of 10.
I had to learn quickly. I didn't have anyone who had my back. I grew up here in Milwaukee on the streets. I was in the system, but like I said, they put me where they had an opening. So the families I was with didn't necessarily care at all. So I'd be out running the streets and they locked me out or something like that. So I'd have to find my own food. I'd have to get clothes from friends or, get money somehow to get clothes, stuff like that. Like, no one cared. It's just how it was. So I just pretty much just stopped telling them stuff because it wouldn't do any good anyway. They wouldn't do anything about it. Because I'm a little kid, like what little kid would actually have those problems? I'm sure they probably didn't believe me for some of it. They probably was just like, he's probably exaggerating. Didn't actually look into the things and the problems that I was having. And that made things a lot harder because the workers are the people that are supposed to, if things are going bad, those are the people that are supposed to make it better. And that did not happen that much at all.
Children who age out, we find among the homeless population. Many of those children end up in the prison population. Many of them have gone through multiple moves, many different schools, many different families. Some have been in residential treatment, so many different experiences. Many of them have difficulty attaching. They are experiencing issues of loss. Some of them end up being involved in substance abuse. All kinds of negative issues occur because they really don't have any sort of permanent family connection, who to hold on to. Permanency is needed for those youth. Many have stayed in the system for far too many years and have moved far too many times.
The mission of Adopt Us Kids is to recruit and connect foster and adoptive parents with waiting children. You don't have to be perfect to be able to adopt. We need families that want to to adopt. The campaign objective is to change the public perception about adoption from the foster care system, to increase the number of potential adoptive families inquiring, and most importantly, the goal is to ultimately have more older children that are placed. The focus is on older children. Others never did exist.
Besides raising awareness of the disparities in the child care system, the summit offered guidance to parents in attendance seeking assistance on how to help their children who were now in the system.
They always saying poverty, poverty, but I think my part is a lack of education, so I don't know how to represent myself. Also, I get very emotional, so when you get emotional, people don't tend to listen to you as much and they kind of brush you off. I don't know how to help her because I don't know who to go to ask for the help. Also, I get emotional and I don't want to do that no more because I want to fight strongly without getting emotional. And that's what's holding me back because I don't know who to ask for the help. I don't know who to trust because I have asked people to help and they promise me things, but they are empty promises. I want somebody to listen to me as a parent and listen to my child because it's not about me, it's about my child.
As children come into the system, we need to find ways to better enable those children to be returned to their families when they can be done, when this can be done safely. If they cannot remain in their own families, at least with relatives, if that's possible. If they cannot return to family, then we need to move as quickly as possible to get them permanency through adoption. We need to be much more proactive in the recruitment and retention of prospective adoptive families to provide permanency for those children who go through the system, and then will need to be placed in a permanent family.
We have to begin to have a dialogue and a conversation. I think that is what the purpose, overarching purpose of the summit is, to create a community dialogue with community stakeholders, with birth parents, with children who have aged out of care, begin to talk about what are those causal factors, what lends to this epidemic and what we need to do collectively to reverse this trend.
And we're now joined by Jermaine Reed, CEO and President of Fresh Start. Mr. Reed, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Milton.
Mr. Reed, what factors are causing this present crisis in the child welfare system?
Well, there's a lot of talk out there and a lot of research that supports that factors like classism, organizational culture, access and distribution of resources are issues that lend to this current crisis, and we definitely don't want to forget about the elephant, the classic elephant that's in the room, which is racism, structural racism, and also poverty.
Would you define structural racism for our viewers?
Well, structural racism, when we look at attitudes and policies that are designed to promote a certain outcome, if you will, for a certain population of people. So when we look at structural racism, we're looking at the policies and procedures that define an organization and define the culture of an organization, the belief system, the attitudes in that organization, with the outcome to create a gain for one population, but it oppresses another population. Hopefully that.
It makes a lot of sense. Now, just how does those factors affect what's going on here in Milwaukee County?
Well, when we look at the child welfare community, foster care community, when you look at the folk who are in control of child welfare, who define policy, whether you're on a state level or local level, these are people who don't look like the folk who are most affected by child welfare. When we look at the foster care community, you look at the administrators of agencies that are receiving funding. You know, when you look at the folk who are working with families in their home, in their community, oftentimes these folk don't look like the folk that are being served. And so when you look at folks' attitude and their belief system and lack of cultural training and competence, you know, often there's a disconnect between the population being served and those who are serving that population, which creates this cycle of what do you want to say, system abuse and systematic trauma that families experience, which also makes it hard for families to come out of the system.
Not only come out of the system, but how does this affect getting services overall? Because I hear you saying a lot here.
About affect getting services. There's research out there, Milton, that addresses the fact that African American families don't have as much access to some of the same services, like, for example, visits from social workers. You know, families who are in rural communities have reported that they receive more contact, you know, than with families, African American families who are in the community and biological family members. You know, when we look at access to service and service distribution, you know, when you look at a mother or father needs to meet certain court order conditions in order to be reunified with their child, and you look at the order or the sequence in which those services are provided or referred to those families, you have to question what is the logic behind it. For example, if a mother needs to secure employment, she also needs to attend parenting classes, she also needs to find housing, I think it will challenge us to look at what services would be a priority to refer to her. And so if you have mothers and parents who are being referred for, let's say, housing assistance before you offer them employment assistance, the question becomes, how will they maintain the living quarters without adequate income?
Mr. Reed, if people want more information, how can they go about getting it?
They can visit us online by going to www.freshstartmilwaukee.com, or they can call us at 414-351-1100, extension 103.
Mr. Reed, thank you so much for joining us,
Thank
sir.
you, Milton.
And that wraps up this edition of Black Nouveau.
Remember, in the coming week, do something to expand your world. Good night.
Good night.